can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when you know hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, still go. Go, go.
And welcome into another brand new episode of the 5280 podcast on this wonderful week where there's absolutely nothing going on. Again, for the next 3 weeks, like the draft is in 3 weeks. Other than that, absolutely nothing. So we're just going to make stuff up and just roll with it and see how the rumor mill works on Twitter. We'll just roll with it that way. So he goes, no, we got some fun stuff planned for you today. As always, I want to welcome Glenn Hauser, Cameron Parker onto the show. How you doing, fellas?
Good
Doing
evening,
well.
Mundungus.
Oh,
You all right?
I don't know if I like that that sigh of relief, if you want to call it a sigh of relief.
no, I'm having.
That's like Mike after Thanksgiving dinner.
Really? No, I'm having stupid Facebook problems. And it's just
I know. I just saw that.
Yeah,
making me angry. Screw Facebook.
the picture was about as big as, I don't know, the new scoreboard that's going into Empower Field.
There you go. So screw Facebook. Sorry, anybody on Facebook. Well, you're not hearing this anyway, so it sucks to suck, I guess. Let's see. Let's start this off with the thumbnail, right? So I'm hearing like there's rumors flying around that if the Cardinals cannot find a trade partner for DeAndre Hopkins, they're going to release him. Would DeAndre Hopkins be a good idea with the Broncos?
Well, I mean, if they didn't have to give up anything, of course he would be. My concern is the Kansas City Chiefs would dangle Patrick Mahomes in front of him and voila. But
can the Broncos be like dibs and then we win?
Well, continuing Glenn's point, though, it's like it's the other side of it that we may be interested in Hopkins, but he may not be interested in us. You know, I mean, so there's the flip side of that, meaning that like he could be like, these are my list of teams. We're not one of them. And one of those teams just so happens to be the Kansas City Chiefs. And you know, you're talking about a wide receiver room with the Kansas City Chiefs that has gotten more depleted, if you will. They lost McCole Hardman and they also lost
Juju.
Juju.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, it is certainly possible for them to be showing interest. As you know, I'm got the angry face going that it would actually make sense for that to happen. But I mean, yeah, I don't know. I would be furious. But continuing what Glenn was saying, like, yeah, I mean, if you had the opportunity to not give up anything, call the team's bluff, sure. It does make you wonder, though, if you're not giving up those assets and you were strongly interested in Adam Thielen. We bring it back up again, but it's because you were so strongly interested in Adam Thielen and Alan Lazard. Why wouldn't you kick the tires?
Yeah. I just don't think they're going to give him up for any they're not. You mean to tell me that they couldn't get a third round pick?
Yeah,
for DeAndre Hopkins.
It's probably his contract.
Well, they're gonna eat some portion of that anyway. Mm-hmm. So why not try to get a pick? And basically, you're buying, the contract for, your way out of it, or buying a pick for, say, $10 million or whatever it ends up being in dead money.
Yeah, and
I almost wonder though, like if let's say the Broncos do bring DeAndre Hopkins, right? Does that mean we're getting rid of somebody?
Well, we would really. I mean, we already have one of the most expensive receiver rooms as it stands, and that's with Jerry Jeudy on a rookie contract.
Yeah, I think we're third, right?
Yeah, it's definitely top 5.
43 or 45 million or something like that.
It's so at that point you'd be looking at $65 million. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah,
I don't want to get rid of anybody. I feel just very comfortable with the big three that we have right now. I'm not looking to get rid of anybody at this point.
Yeah. Thankfully, it's not my money. I mean, I would love to certainly have DeAndre Hopkins, but that's actually a nice little point that Glenn brought up too. Is like with the money was, because even Odell Beckham Jr. is wanting around 15 million, and I mean, like, if Odell Beckham say he signs his new deal or doesn't sign his new deal, between DeAndre Hopkins and OBJ, I mean, you're talking about one of those two setting the market for that next person of the deal that he's probably going to end up getting. And so, I don't know. It's just, I mean, we've talked about it before. The wide receiver room the Broncos have is a very, very talented room, but it is also a very unproven room.
Mhm.
And so this is one of the reasons why these conversations are happening that we're having is because, is it worth bringing in that kind of true veteran, type of guy like a DeAndre Hopkins? So I wouldn't shy against it, but at the same time, you now have the straw that stirs the entire drink in Sean Payton on that offensive side. And so why not get a chance to see it all unfold with that unproven wide receiver room?
Yeah. So kind of moving on a little bit from that, a little bit of draft. Well, at least there's rumor that the Titans are planning on moving up to 3 ahead of the Colts and trying to grab Anthony Richardson from Florida, the quarterback, which I think is interesting. Like, they're giving up on Malik Willis that fast.
Think where he was drafted.
Yeah, I guess
He was third round, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russ was third round.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I mean, yeah. Brady was, in the much later rounds.
I
But
feel like I've heard this story. Yeah.
yeah. But I just think that that's, I think, the gray area where people and teams have that flexibility. Broncos drafted Drew Lock in the second round. Yeah, he was a high pick, but it wasn't high enough that if they wanted to go out and get another quarterback, they definitely could have done that. And they decided not to do that as far as in the draft.
See, NFL's talking about it right now. They're saying the Ravens could trade with the Colts so that the Ravens can take C.J. Stroud and the Colts get Lamar Jackson.
It's possible. I think the Ravens are doing quietly their due diligence on Lamar Jackson.
CJ Stroud's going to be the number 1 pick.
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being.
That's what I thought.
It's going to end up being C.J. Stroud, or it's going to end up being Bryce Young. It's going to be one of those two.
Well, they're going to be the top 2 picks.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't see Houston moving up.
So basically, they're saying C.J. Stroud falls. You got the Titans move up to 3rd to get Richardson. You got the Colts moving back to get Lamar, and the Ravens will get C.J. Stroud. I don't think Stroud falls that far.
No. The only thing that doesn't make any it just doesn't make any sense to begin with is there was I didn't believe it, but there was the news that came out with the Panthers that said they were still in talks about who they wanted to draft at quarterback. They weren't set in stone with who they wanted to draft, and if they had if they had another deal in place of moving backwards, after they just traded up to 1, I remember hearing something like that. But that's we're still talking about the Panthers. We're not talking about the Colts or anything like that. So as far as validity of Stroud dropping, that'd be the only thing with at least some validity of maybe why Stroud could drop. But
right.
I mean, you're still talking about Bryce Young and CJ Stroud going 1 and 2, and then I think it's just truly probably about Anthony Richardson. And do teams want to take that risk, if you want to call it a risk, about a project like that, or maybe even a Will Levis of do people want to take that on as far as a project like that? But I don't know.
Well,
I
that
think
could
Will
be
Levis
interesting. If you're looking at, sorry, Glenn, if you're looking at the Titans moving up, taking Anthony Richardson over C.J. Stroud, that could be interesting too. I don't understand why people think he's going to fall.
Ooh, which one?
C.J. Stroud.
Oh yeah.
Why would you take if let's say you get to the point where CJ Stroud is available and you have Anthony Richardson? Why would you take Richardson over CJ Stroud?
Exactly. It would be. I mean, this quarterback discussion for the draft class has gone from you had two proven guys with Stroud and Bryce Young to two completely different wild cards, if you will, in Will Levis and Anthony Richardson. And Anthony Richardson is probably one of the more freakier athletes, that we've seen in some time, especially with this combine tape and everything. So I can definitely see a team, say like Carolina, say they do draft Anthony Richardson at number one, but that's just because one, they did all their due diligence. They definitely did all their homework on every single quarterback, and they went out and they absolutely just were so sold on Anthony Richardson.
Yeah. No, this would be my kids, not me. I do not go into the school and play in the band, the elementary band.
I can see a Will Levis dropping a little bit.
Yeah,
and it's interesting because Hendon Hooker is now considered a first-round pick, even with his injury. A possibility with New Orleans, even.
Yeah.
So I'm happy for him. I think I thought he was great last year. I know there was some concern that he's I think he's going to be 25 when the season starts, but who cares? These guys are playing until they're 39, 40 years old. I mean,
and then retiring.
Yeah. So, one of the things, and it's funny you brought that up, Glenn, because Sayer put on his famous tinfoil hat. I'm sure you guys all remember the picture that he shared on Facebook with his tinfoil hat and the conspiracy time. But he actually shared today in our predominantly orange Slack chat, like a type of scenario where, like, say Levis falls, but his tinfoil hat situation was, so I don't know if many people, know this. Glenn, maybe with being on the East Coast, but so they took a visit with Sean Clifford, right, at Penn State, right? Mm-hmm. Will Levis was a former Penn State quarterback,
right?
And Clifford has been there since 1985. So he's been there, since Levis was there. So tinfoil hat time would suggest that are the Broncos doing some extra, maybe due diligence of interviewing Clifford, but also getting some minute details of maybe Will Levis. So in case Levis sort of falls within the cracks and is on that day 2 radar of maybe the second round and within reaching distance for a trade up, it would be pretty tempting if you're the Broncos to certainly trade up in that type of situation, but they wouldn't be the only ones.
Yeah.
He throws a great pass, though. I mean, that ball just
and
sits
he
right
knows it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
And he also has like one of the weirdest
photo
food quirks and drink quirks I have ever seen.
I haven't tried it. Have you?
Well, no, I've never eaten a banana with the peel.
I think you're talking about the mayonnaise in the coffee.
Yeah, and I've never drinking coffee with mayonnaise. No, I have not done that. So it's probably understandable why he's falling on some draft boards.
Yeah, people like coffee in the mayonnaise in the coffee is too much. I can't handle it. So there was some talk going around about, and they've had the discussion before about having a division in Europe. So that would mean like 4 teams. Well, there was a story that came out. They were talking about it on NFL Network about within the next 8 years, there could be 40 teams and Europe would have its own division.
Yeah, Mike Florio said
How
that.
would that even work for let's say you add, take the Broncos. Would you have to make 2 European trips?
Yeah. I don't know.
Florio said that on McAfee, I think last week.
Yeah, it was last week. Yeah.
That was news to me. I didn't realize that there was going to be talk of such expansion at these levels. You know, there's always that thought that the owners don't want more hands in the pie. You know, like how much more can these companies pay for the broadcast rights and things like that? But yeah, that would certainly be interesting. The scheduling is very curious on that. Like you said, Mike, you know, how would you do that? How would you do buys? I mean, then again, the league doesn't really care about the players because they would love to have them, you know, have 2 Thursday night games or flex into Thursday night.
Well, and the whole discussion they went off on was, you know, do you even have that many high level quarterbacks to play at an NFL level? I mean, we don't even have that many right now. I mean, you have a lot of teams that are playing with backups on, you know, bridging the gap until they get to like their franchise quarterback. Are there even 40 quarterbacks that can play at that level right now?
Well, Cam Newton would then have to say, there are 40 MFers better than me.
And in that case, he might be right. You know, one of the things that, two of the things I kind of also thought of was like, where's Mexico in this? Because they do games in Mexico. Because they do games in Mexico too. So they're going to shaft the ability to do a game in Mexico. You know, to do some teams and down there in Europe. I think one of the creative things, you know, for at least some teams in Europe would maybe not necessarily doing like a continuation of the NFL, but doing sort of, should I say, like the things that they do for soccer, you know, like you have the English Premier League, the Spanish Premier League, you know, stuff like that, but doing some of the exposure, which is maybe like I guess you could call it like a one-off thing, in terms of, say like the ability for it to, you know, not be associated with the NFL as far as the league concerned, but it's like maybe like treat it like that's like your developmental league. Maybe that's something that you can kind of consider there. Granted, it is still overseas. That's still a lot of work still with it being overseas, but like an English Premier League, a Spanish Premier League, or something overseas within Europe that you can, you know, for that. So
I would foresee that they would have 4 teams in Europe, and I think Mexico, if there was an expansion of 8 more teams, that Mexico City would be one of them here. You got to think that. You have to think that St. Louis would be back in the mix after what happened to them. You know, would a Toronto be, you know, someone else in, you know, but that's pretty close to Buffalo. So
aren't Toronto and Buffalo like right next to each other?
They are, but I don't know how many people from Canada are coming into Orchard Park to see the Bills. So
And to kind of pick up where you were talking, you could almost think that they could put 2 teams in Mexico City, right? Like the population of Mexico City is huge. So you'd almost think they could put 2 in Mexico City and not have to expand too much out of that range.
What about Yankton?
No, not even a little bit.
What about Nebraska? You know, get all these teams, you know, just off the Nebraska Cornhuskers bandwagon and actually have a pro football team.
I was actually talking with Bill about that, like if putting one in Omaha, because I mean Omaha is bigger than Jacksonville, it's bigger than Green Bay. I mean, I could eventually see one going there. Do I want one there? Nope.
But there's other options, obviously, but it's one that's
San Diego, St. Louis.
No, they can't touch. They can't touch California anymore. There's too many sports teams in general in California.
Yeah, where would that fourth? I mean, you got Vancouver, but that's close to Seattle. You've got. Just Montreal would be an interesting one. You know, that's 4 hours north of me. So the nearest team to Montreal would be the Patriots.
But are they thinking about putting all 8 of those in Europe though? Because where would they even? You need like
I wasn't sure, but when Cam mentioned Mexico City, it just made it. They cannot ignore that. You know,
well,
that's
so they'd have to put 4 in Europe if there's going to be a division there.
right.
So you'd think there'd be like London, somewhere
Germany.
in Germany, somewhere in France, and somewhere in Italy. Maybe something like that. I don't know.
Well, you
But
definitely
then-
have to think that London and Germany are certainly two areas that would, because they are focusing on that. They do have games playing in Germany. I think there are 2 games back to back this year, playing
Quebec City.
in Germany, but I think they're playing in 2 different cities. Quebec City would be interesting too. So,
well, the beautiful thing about Canada is like you could. That's one where you can definitely open it up to not just one team but multiple there, and I think that would be, really fun. And especially if the Canadian Football League is still a thing, you can.
This?
I don't know, but I'm just saying like, but I'm just saying that like, I think it's one of the reasons that we've talked about it, I think, last year, but like with the whole XFL thing and the USFL thing and stuff like that, and the AAF, I think it's basically the NFL trying to say to us without even saying to us at all, even though it may be unaffiliated, should I say, even though it is unaffiliated, but it's like, I think they're trying to experiment with this whole idea of a truly like a minor league system, like a developmental system without kind of like getting to it. So the fact that they're kind of expanding to 40 teams, one, for me though, like expanding to 40 teams just feels like way too much. And so you'd have to also like expand the season out almost too, which they've already done, which is basically 18 games. And then at that point, you absolutely would have to acquiesce the players and saying, okay, well, we'll have 2 bye weeks, as well.
right.
And because if there's 1 bye week, I could certainly understand. Okay, it would be almost like, okay, if you're going to visit in back-to-back weeks, say like London game and a Munich game, all in 2 weeks. Then after that, that's when you do the bye.
They would almost have to go to 40 though, wouldn't they? Because you would need basically 2 divisions. You can't just add 4 because then you're adding an extra division either in the AFC or the NFC. And then you can't just add like 2 because then you're unbalancing 2 already made divisions. So you almost have to go to 40, don't you? Just to add a division to the AFC, add a division to the NFC, and then it's all evened out.
It just feels like so many teams. Because I mean, like, because they even talked about the exposure, and then obviously the 40 teams, which is 8, than what it's already.
Right.
So,
I agree with Tex's last comment. I'm not convinced that as a team. I think one of the reasons why it's the NFL is so popular there is that there's a variety of teams. I know Jacksonville is a staple there, but from what you see when you're watching is every team has jerseys represented in the crowd there.
Yeah.
What does happen if you have the Barcelona Dragons, like they did back in the day, and they're playing, 10 games at home? What is it gonna be as hot as if you have 4 or 5 games on the continent during a season? I don't know, but it was news to me when I heard that the other day, and I thought that was interesting talking point for sure.
Yeah. All right, so let's kind
I'm
of
just noticing that Cam and Vince McMahon have the same mustache. Did you just notice?
Right?
Except I have the bottom part.
It was so weird. Like you turn it on and it's like this itty bitty skinny mustache that's brown, and it's like, dude, you're in your 80s. You don't have brown hair still. Like it's white. What? Just why? He dyed his hair, dyed his eyebrows, dyed his mustache. It's just dumb.
I mean, he looked like Wayne Newton and the guy who would tie a woman
Hey,
to the train
KB82.
tracks had a baby. Like it was just a weird combo. Ken, what's up, man? We gotta have you on one of these days.
We're going to start digging into free agents a little bit. I know we've already had the first wave of free agency, but there's a lot of free agents still out there. So I kind of want to go over like who was our biggest loss in free agency, and then look over the remaining free agents and kind of pick out who we think we would want on the Broncos. Because we still have holes, still a lot of players available. Let's add them onto the team. So who do you guys think is our biggest free agent loss?
That's that's kind of hard. But I also feel like when you kind of look at it from my vantage point, they also did a pretty good job potentially even maybe replacing the player. With maybe just in air quotes a cheaper version. But I would say Draymond Jones. I would say Draymond Jones is definitely the biggest loss. But they also kind of factor it in, and we've talked about it before, but brought in a guy who is cheaper and maybe adds just a tad bit better pass rush. Even though Draymond is, I think in the long run, is when we said it's probably going to be a much, much better player.
Is he cheaper though? I mean, they're pretty comparable.
I kind of said in air quotes like cheaper.
Cheaper.
Yeah.
Getting Zach Allen was a great consolation prize. Like with Draymond being gone, but I got to tell you, like he just did not do himself any favors as far as I'm concerned. With the Broncos faithful, the way he exited, just the last few months he was there, just being sour about Bradley Chubb, being traded when we all knew that there was no way Chubb was coming back the following year. So at least we got a first round draft choice for him. I mean, it's just, yeah.
I was going to say, when you talk about that, and I've never actually even said this, but he was a great player for the Broncos, arguably a Ring of Famer at some point down the line. But it almost, I don't know about you guys, but it almost like was reminiscent of Chris Harris Jr. at the tail end of his career, with the way that Chris Harris was a little bit bitter, a little bit, frustrated with the way things were certainly going and kind of voicing his opinion. And maybe at the point in time where he was thinking he was a little bit better than where he was, and he was a little bit of a liability, and then in the latter part of his career in Denver. So I kind of felt, and again, I don't know about you guys, but it was like almost a spitting image of the way things ended with Chris Harris Jr.
Yeah. So it was similar to that without the accomplishment, right? So like, CHJ had a Super Bowl under his belt, no fly zone, all pros. Listen, I wanted Draymond back, so
yeah,
I'm not being overly two-faced, but just he made it easy to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
KB82 says Graham Glasgow only because I would have loved him to be at center on a cheaper contract. I'm actually going to go opposite of what you guys said. I'm actually going to go with Dalton Risner, but it's not because of play. I think he could have gotten better, but I think that anytime you lose a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee, you're losing a fantastic person in that locker room. Mm-hmm. So for me, I feel that losing Dalton Risner was a big loss in the locker room. I know that he had that blow up with Brett, but at the same time, like, aren't all football players passionate about winning and losing? I know he went too far, but like when you have a Walter Payton Man of the Year nominee and he's not on the team anymore, I think that's a big loss. So I'm going Dalton Risner.
And you guys know me, I'm a big Dalton Risner fan. But I will say, to the flip side of that, Mike, when you are a Walter Payton Man of the Year, you can't put yourself in that kind of situation.
Yep.
You can't. So yeah, I don't know. But also, but it's funny you mentioned Risner is a big loss. One of the biggest additions was in essence the guy who replaced him.
Yeah.
For
Powers.
so, yeah, I mean, without doubt, I mean, he would probably be up there between he and, you know, even if it's been some negative talk on social media, Mike McGlinchey, you know, and obviously Zach Allen. So, I mean, like between those three, I mean, those are probably three of your, you know, top favorite, you know, contributors or favorite signings. And we already talked about that, but it's like Ben Powers, you can't, you know, certainly hate the idea for the Broncos spending that amount of money to finally lock up a guard position for quite a while.
Yeah.
The Reisner and Rippon sitcom could be called Push and Shove.
Jesus.
Right.
Wouldn't that be perfect?
Push and shove.
I honestly am surprised that Dalton did not get signed in the first wave. I mean, he's still out there. What is his salary going to look like? You know, we're 3 weeks away from the draft, and there are a lot of players out there.
I think we're coming to the point with Reisner where, and this is actually what I was going to say is like I'm fine bringing it back at this point because it's like we are almost like teetering on the point of it's going to be a 1 year prove it deal. You know, like it's a 1 year.
He's not going to play.
But right, but I mean, but also you can still never have too much, you know, depth on an offensive line. So I would almost, and I'm not saying he would ever do it, but I would almost, you know, circle back on Dalton, ask if he wants to come back, you know, maybe talk about some terms and, you know, for a 1 year deal, what would it be and what would it look like? You know, and I don't know, and we've talked about it before on Mainly, and, you know, I think you guys kind of caught it at that tail end of on one of our episodes, but it's like, you know, Maddie brought up the point of this is also a guy. Now, granted, it's been a very long time since he did it, you know, but I mean, at Kansas State, he played numerous positions on the offensive line, one being a position of need right now for the Denver Broncos. So he played center. So, I mean, like, you know, maybe there's some conversing back and forth of, you know, what would be the appropriate deal to give him, and do you want to take that starting center job? But yeah, I'm with you though, Glenn. I was shocked to see him not be signed already.
I mean, Elijah Wilkinson got signed today, and Dalton Reisner is still out there.
Yeah.
So KB82 says, what are some of the big names in the NFL that are still out there? That's where we're going right now, is to see what free agents still available. Do you guys just want to go down the list, or do you want to go by position? What do you want to do?
No, let's kind of bounce around. Like,
all right. So I'm just going to pull up. So Glenn, if you want to kind of watch the comments, because I'm going to be bouncing back and forth. Can everybody see that? Is that better? There we go. Okay.
I mean,
so the interesting one, like Bud Dupree, like he was only on the Titans last year, right?
He's been injured the last few years.
Yeah.
I don't love that idea. I mean, my top target would be Yannick Ngakoue as an edge on the defensive side, and Connor McGovern as a center on the offensive side.
And that's the one that came from the Jets, right?
Yeah, our Connor. Yeah.
Okay.
Connor.
Yeah, no, I like
I think McGovern made $8 million last year, or was in line to make something along those lines.
I still find it interesting that Taylor Lewan is still out there, though.
I think that one might be because there's been some buzz with him about maybe retiring. Some small buzz, but yeah.
K-2 says Byron Jones.
See, that's a tough one. Didn't he just go on
talk about retiring
and say that he can't move?
Yeah. So if we're
Taylor
gonna
Lewan, though, he's got that successul podcast. You know, I can see him just moving on, and he's gonna have. I mean, he made a ton of money. You know.
What about this one right here?
Frank Clark. You mentioned that. I'll give that one to you, Glenn, because you even mentioned that in our chat. With Frank Clark as a question.
Yeah, and you know, I don't love Frank Clark as a off the field guy. I'm surprised he wasn't suspended for some of his antics. And antics is putting it lightly. But if you could get a talent like that and stick it to Kansas City at the same time, I mean, it's Neil Smith all over again.
He would be like, for a modern day, but like he would be like a modern day version of Sean Phillips for us.
Yeah.
Right. But like another one that kind of like caught my eye. Actually, two of them kind of caught my eye. And granted, there's been some familiarity with one of the players. Actually, two of the players. I don't know why I said that. Marcus Golden from Arizona. So some more familiarity with Vance. And then he is a outside linebacker.
Yep, right there from Arizona.
He's
getting up there in age, though.
Hey, depth is depth.
There are a lot of old players still remaining, though. Yeah. You were just going to say Clowney, weren't you? I mean,
yeah,
he's younger than I thought. He's way younger than I thought. He's 30. I thought he was like 34. He's hurt a lot, though, too. He is.
But we're used to hurt.
Like Ngakoue makes sense. I do like that.
Well, if you sign Ngakoue, you got to just figure you're getting him on a 1-year deal, because that's what happens. But he's going to get you, high single digits, maybe low double digits in sacks. I think he's going to be on his 6th team in 4 years. Like, it's crazy.
This
Frankie
one,
Roby,
yeah,
is interesting.
That one I think is interesting because that is, for positionally. You can never have too many corners, and Roby isn't just a player that has chemistry with Vance Joseph, but he also has chemistry with Sean Payton, and that is one that, frankly, I could see the Roby move, or dare I say, another familiar face, familiar face, and Shelby Harris. Like, I would love Shelby Harris back. You'd have like the ultimate volleyball team with Zach Allen and Shelby Harris knocking down passes at the defensive line.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about guys to bring back, Cam Fleming, bring him back. You're talking about depth on the offensive line. He's 30 years old. He had a great season last year. Really good. Would probably not cost much money. I'd be open to bringing Ronald Darby back if he's healed from his injury. Right. He's still out there. What would it take to get it? I mean, some of these, when we see these contracts, like those are the ones that are going to be like, it's brutal. Like, a couple of the other ones I have on my list, like Shelby was on there. Latavius Murray. That's probably going to be one of those where it's a last minute, like come in for $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever. And another one that's kind of interesting is Leonard Fournette. I put him on here. I didn't put Ezekiel because I could care less about that guy. But
it's fine though. He could play.
Fournette is 28 years old, and I think there's still gas left in that tank. He was a contributor on that. During the successful years for the Bucs.
I'm still gonna push the Ezekiel Elliott. Like, I'm not saying I would pick him over like Kareem Hunt. I'd rather have Kareem Hunt than Ezekiel Elliott. But if at the right price point, I don't see why Zeke would be a bad option, at least for a year or two.
Okay, if for me, I would get rid of all those with the exception of I really do like McGovern, but trade for Derrick Henry. Okay, let's just get Derrick Henry. if he's available, let's figure out a way, and that would solve all our problems. I
actually like these three right here: Fournette, Ben Jones, and Cameron Brate.
Well, I mean,
can you imagine Russell Wilson in the huddle with like Ben Powers, Tim Patrick, Mike McGlinchey, Derrick Henry? Like he'd look like a Keebler elf. Like he'd just.
Yeah, it would be almost like, so this is what Kyler Murray feels like.
I'm in the shade.
So I think as far these weren't necessarily I should say this particular player was on my free agency wish list, and he's not signed yet. And since we are in the business of, say, having a reunion in a sense of Boston College teammates, I would throw in John Johnson in there as well. John Johnson, I think, was a safety with Simmons at Boston College. That's like my not Adrian Amos, although I would love Adrian Amos. By the way, that would be a bit of irony, and that's to Ken's point that he brought up. But that'd be a bit of irony because I don't know if you guys remember, but like there was a point in time where many in Broncos country thought Adrian Amos was like this close to signing with the Broncos, and then with Fangio, and then hours later, it ended up being Kareem Jackson, who might actually end up being another one, because that was a little nugget that actually was shared last week that said that the Broncos are in talks with Kareem to bring him back. Not necessarily, say amounting to anything. I have a running back though. I have a running back if he's not signed already, but let's see if he's. I gotta see if he's available.
Well, let's look.
Yes, he is. Okay, so Jarek McKinnon. Jarek McKinnon is the guy that I was actually having in mind. Like, if you don't want Kareem Hunt and you just want a true passing back out of the backfield, a touchdown maniac, it'd be Jarek McKinnon.
I heard he's looking for big bucks. I mean,
rightfully so, though, too.
And there's always J.D. McKissick from Washington. He's that same type of back. What about Eli Apple?
No,
he's just so hot and cold.
Okay,
and he's also,
but he's just so mouthy too. Like that's, it's like, dude, if you're that inconsistent, just like shut the, up. It's
shut your face.
Yeah. Keep my wife's name. Okay.
There you go.
Ken says Jarvis Landry. I do like Jarvis.
I was going to say, like, outside of DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, there's Jarvis Landry. We're not doing OBJ.
Oh, gosh.
Well, that's the thing. Is like, if you are going to be in the business of, we talked about it earlier, but it's like if you're going to be in the business of being interested in those kinds of players, like, you'd almost have to kick the tires on OBJ, even though you weren't at his, his pro day in essence.
Yeah. A little old, but Rex Burkhead might be an option at running back as well.
I'll pass. I love the guy. He's top 5 favorite Husker running back for me, but I'll pass.
What about Sue?
I mean, the fun fact about Ndamukong Suh is every team that he signs with goes to the Super Bowl lately. So,
shoot, Linval Joseph wouldn't be a bad one either. They're Trevor Siemian.
He's actually visiting the Cincinnati Bengals today.
Anthony Barr, that wouldn't be bad.
Familiarity with George Payton.
Trying to think if there's Trey Flowers, Sammy Watkins.
There's also Rashard Higgins from Colorado State, formerly of Carolina and Cleveland.
Oh, stop it. Sign Joe Flacco.
What's a fax machine?
Yeah, what's a fax machine?
I call mine the Doomerville.
What about bringing back Bryce Callahan?
I would not hate that one bit at all.
He had a good year last year.
He was
my boy.
Rex Specs.
The mad scientist right there. Get him.
I didn't know he was on a team last year.
But I mean, yeah, there's some definite options.
Carl Nassib. I remember him at the Raiders.
And we really are going to be leaning a lot on these free agents because presently we have 5 picks in the draft, and who knows how many we're going to end up with. Do you bounce back from back-to-back third-round picks? I don't think you do you? I mean,
yeah. Well,
isn't that area of the draft where George Payton described as the sweet spot? He's like, the sweet spot of the draft is right here, and it was exactly where the Broncos had their first 2 picks. I'm like, tell that to the Carolina Panthers, who just gave up their entire
Oh, right there.
entire.
Eric Fisher.
man,
Used to be a big name. Is he still having injury problems?
I think he sat out a year, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, these guys are a lot of these guys are just hacks.
Oh, I have a name. I have a name. Jawan James.
Shut up. Jason, moving on. Jason Pierre-Paul.
Dude, Jawan James. Why don't we just bring Nathaniel Hackett back as our coach?
Yeah. Well,
that would be a more popular move.
I mean, we're people are already up in arms with the whole Mike McGlinchey contract. We might as well just have it be in full force and just sign Jawan James.
Bubba wants to know what it would honestly take to acquire a player like Hopkins. Well, what would it take? What is he worth, or what do the Cardinals want for him? I guess is
what are we? And the other question, what are we giving up? Because we only have a small amount of picks, unless we give up future picks.
Because I will say this: DeAndre Hopkins was not the same with the Cardinals as he was with the Texans. I'm assuming it has something to do with the coach and the scheme
and quarterback.
But DeAndre Hopkins was not the same once he left.
And his performance enhancing drugs, but which I remember Albright was saying that he was on the radar for a very, very long time, for many years. That with the league knowing what was happening there, there was kind of a group of the guys that were involved in that, and he finally got pinched last year.
I mean, I don't know why you couldn't get maybe 2 picks for Hopkins, maybe a 3rd and a 6th, or a 3rd and a 7th, 3rd and a 5th maybe, but I would think that's probably about it.
Yeah, I think KB's right. I think they would want a pick and a player, and KB says,
yeah, it would probably be a wide receiver swap. Probably it would be one of those rare wide receiver swaps.
But it wouldn't be a straight up trade.
Yeah.
And Sports Nonsense, who's coming on after us, predicts that George will be trading both 3rd rounders. And I've been wrong before, so perhaps that is the case.
Well, I was going to say, do you think the Broncos would trade? And we talked about the wide.
I think he's talking about trading him back to garner more picks.
Right, that's what I'm saying. Do you think the Broncos would trade the 3rd rounders to move back or move up?
I think they would. I think they would select at one of them and then move back. Okay. So, I don't know if it'll be both, but I can definitely see them selecting one of them and then moving back.
So you don't see them trading both 3rds to move into the 2nd?
Mm-mm. But and that's also my gut feeling, and also I think Kliss, if I'm not mistaken, had it in his article. His mystery mockster is what he called it. But he said something along the he said something along the lines that he could see the Broncos trading one of those picks.
The mystery
Giovanni Bernard.
He would be an interesting one. I mean, but see, the thing with the running back class, and this is kind of the thing too, is I think we're actually at that point, given where the draft class is at for running back, that I think teams are now willing to, especially with it being April now, willing to just kind of let the draft happen, and then whatever happens, then they circle back on some of these free agents. That's not a Broncos sole thing. That's just an every team thing. So they're probably going to be circling back on some of these free agents, like a running back and stuff like that. After the draft, I think he had some familiarity with Vance. He had one of the most impressive. I got to say, he had one of the most impressive runs that I had the chance to see, and that was his run against Kansas City, which we should have won that game. That's besides the point. But it was the Monday Night Football game where it was a toss to the right, and it looked like it was dead to rights. Kansas City had him, and then he broke 3 or 4 tackles, and winning for the score. But
You see Chris Banjo on the list. That's an interesting one.
right. Well, I mean, thankfully he's on the staff, so I mean, they could just roll him out there.
Actually, I think you're not allowed to do that. I think we learned that when during the Kendall Hinton Hall of Fame game.
You sure? Because Longest Yard told me that the new one with.
Mike, I think we're looking at the land of the island of misfit toys.
Yeah, and I know that we talked about it. I know we've talked about it before, but like, you have to think he's in consideration to come back, right?
Oh,
like familiarity with Sean Payton, you would think that he'd be the one, right?
For sure. And we
not only that, but also effectiveness last year, and not appearing to be his age.
I can scroll
at any point during that stretch. Oh God.
How about now? What you gonna do? Anybody motion sick yet?
The one thing that I will say about let's see,
I'll go slow.
The one thing I will say just
Mike
about
Good Lord.
Yeah, that's a flashback.
How to lose a Super Bowl in one easy step.
Yeah, but the thing with Latavius Murray, and I mentioned before, is like it just depends on where the Broncos are at, because I mean, if they want to absolutely punish people with their backfield, then Latavius would make a lot of sense. But on the surface, stylistically, Pirine and Murray are about the same back, if you will, as far as brute physicality and the reliability out of the backfield and between the tackles and so on and so forth. So I would feel like the Pirine move would be one that's like, unfortunately, we're going to move on from Murray, and we'll go to the draft or we'll sign someone else, because they do need a pass catching back. Absolutely. So,
Michael Jordan.
What do you think of Bubba's question?
Would a 4th and 2-6 work for Hopkins?
I think they're trying to get rid of his salary. So probably. My guess is that they're going to go for at least a 3rd. I can't imagine.
Their whole offer thing kind of fluctuated big time, because it went from like a 2nd and a 3rd, I think it was, to at one point near the later part to where we are now was like a 5th and a 6th. So
I like Marlon Mack too. What?
It's just Glenn saying thank you.
One thing that we haven't talked about, the possibility of the Broncos moving on from McManus. There was a lot of free agent kickers in there. I don't want to say names, Maher, but if we wanted to make more field goals, Maher would be the opposite of where we'd want to go, right?
At least in the playoffs.
He was awesome last year up until that point.
The playoffs.
I felt so bad.
Like, would Brett Maher be a legitimate upgrade over McManus? McManus struggled a lot last year.
Yeah.
And the
Maher didn't have issues with the field goals. I think it was the extra points that were the problem.
That's the other. He probably sent
go for 2 and let the guy kick field goals.
He was probably the one that maybe sent the new rule change of let's just avoid the extra points altogether. We'll go with the XFL extra point system. But
yeah, I wouldn't be at all shocked at Brandon McManus. I mean, you imagine if he goes up to Sean Payton and he complains about getting an opportunity.
Exactly.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I would not be surprised though if either they, and look, I've not gone over the kickers in the draft, but I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if the Broncos at all added competition or they moved on from Brandon McAnus at some point this year.
I mean, I think there's at least like Mason Crosby would be one I'd be okay with. Ryan Suckup is okay.
Mason Crosby is like 75 years old now, though.
He's 38. Robbie Gould's 40. Zane Gonzalez from the Cardinals. I don't know. I still think I'd go with Maher out of that whole list. Because that's it. That's all you got for free agent kickers.
I would probably go with Zane Gonzalez, probably out of that group.
Really?
I wouldn't. I'd go for a rookie.
Yeah, that's what. So like out of that group, I would choose Zane, but I mean, ideally, I would want a much younger option, which is both scary and the right option. Yes, he's in the XFL now.
He's with the Sea Dragons. I think that's the name, right? Seattle Sea Dragons.
By the way, kudos to former Denver Bronco, now tight end in the XFL, Cody Latimer. He's been doing pretty good down there in the XFL.
He has been doing very well. Yes,
I heard. Wasn't Max Borghi on the team too?
Yeah, you mean Christian McCaffrey light?
Yeah. Has he done anything?
I've
seen some XFL games, not a lot.
I just know that we should have brought him back. I'm just saying, like we have Sean Payton. I mean, he literally looks like Christian McCaffrey. I don't mean like maybe play style.
McCaffrey even acknowledges that.
Yeah,
I think McCaffrey posted that the other day.
I'm trying to remember high school. I think was like Christian had already gone on to Stanford, and then Borghi came on the scene, like right within high school football, and started doing a lot of the same, shock and awe, if you will, of what Christian was doing, and then everybody from that moment on just kind of coined Borghi as like that next Christian McCaffrey. But I don't know. Hey, put him on, for one, too, it's like he was also on the Broncos for like a very short amount of time. So at least see what he's got.
So a couple things before we go, just so we make sure we cover everything we wanted to talk about. The Broncos came out with a cryptic tweet about white helmets.
Wouldn't exactly say that was cryptic.
Is it just helmets or is it the full uniform?
I will say.
What I mean by cryptic. Was it just helmet or the whole thing?
I will say it's just a helmet.
Because like Boggins was messing around with he thinks it's a white helmet with the old D logo on it. But like there's also those helmets that are white and with the new Broncos head, but the Broncos head is all orange.
I think those
make sense too.
I think those are two of your best bets. If it was my choice,
gotta be the retro logo. Gotta be.
If it was my choice, it would have to be the alternate of the Color Rush helmet, and then
with all whites.
With all whites.
So Color Rush in white.
But that's the thing is like, unless there's something we don't know if they. I mean, Madden certainly tells us that they have a alternate Color Rush, but I don't know if they have like an alternate to the Color Rush uniform. And so if they have like an alternate to that uniform, which is basically the white uniform of that, then sure, it would make a lot of sense. But those are definitely two of your best alternatives, unless
and that's happening this season, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Then they have to wear it. I think at least what they say twice.
I don't know. Do they have to wear alternates twice?
I have not heard how many times you can do it.
So
and then the last thing, obviously everybody knows we're spending a crap ton of money upgrading Empower Field, right? Empower Stadium, the football field. Do we know what they're adding? And is there a wish list for you? Like, what would you want them to add to make the fan experience better with the upgrades? Because obviously we're not going to be getting a new stadium for a while. So if they're upgrading the current stadium, what could they add? Like, what's a wish for you?
Like, I would love a giant scoreboard. Like that.
I can tell you in driving down to the events that I went down to about a week ago, that the scoreboard is off. Bucky the Bronco and that scoreboard is gone. So it seems like they're kind of already started maybe the process of that scoreboard.
Oh, they're well into it.
Yeah. So yeah. But I would say scoreboard.
I was being sarcastic because that's what they.
Yeah, but I'd be kind of curious, like what they would do with the scoreboard. Like I don't. No, not the old scoreboard. Like just in general. But I heard something about the concessions, and I kind of like the concessions that they had. So I'd be kind of curious to know what it is that they would add. So if they do concessions, a dream for me would to put Chick-fil-A in the stadium, and even though it's Sunday, have it so that they can people can truly go up and order Chick-fil-A in the stadium. Actually, I think some
Chick-fil-A doesn't work on Sunday, so that wouldn't.
That's why they have one in the Atlanta stadium. It's not open during the Falcon.
So yeah, it's not open until the Falcon. Yeah, so. But I think a truly like a fan experience of what they've done with Coors Field, which would be actually really cool. I don't know exactly what they would do with it or how big it would be. I know they have like the mini Mile High Stadium, the original Mile High Stadium outside the stadium, and obviously the Bowens statue and, should I say like the Ring of Fame, statues that they have outside. But it would be nice to have some sort of fan experience, or some bit of that outside the stadium to truly garner like all fan interest, if you will.
Well, I mean, some of the things that they're doing, they're doing a lot of concessions. I believe they're renovating all of the luxury boxes. There's going to be a huge amount of changes on the club level or upgrades. I mean, truly, if anyone's been to the game, like Wi-Fi would be nice. Like, it's
that would be nice.
Yeah. And I think you're going to get that because they're going to be really pushing the in-game betting.
Yeah.
So they're going to need the fans to get in there. I mean, that's going to be just a huge selling feature. I know the team store is
getting redone.
Is they're adding a ton of space, several thousand square feet to that. They're actually adding bathrooms into the team store, which is funny. I've never had to use the facilities there, and it was basically a storage closet that was filthy. It was, so it's stuff like that. But the price tag is $100 million in an off season. The scoreboard is going to be really, really cool. I think it's to see replays to just when they're getting the crowd pumped up. It'll be interesting to see Miles standing on the top there, since it's going to be so much higher. He's probably going to get like blown right off, like to land in Cam's backyard.
You're right.
It's should be interesting.
Yeah.
And with that, that's going to about do it. I think we go ahead, Glenn.
I was going to say I would like to see some older players getting into the Ring of Fame. Like I'd like to see them adding more people on an annual basis to try to catch up to some of the people that have been.
What would you do anything different? Because I mean, at some point, you're probably going to run out of some space, with the Ring of Fame. But would you do something maybe a little bit different as far as what they would do, stadium wise, and maybe like dedicate like a Ring of Fame monument outside the stadium, like where they just keep adding to it?
I think you can find room around the stadium. I think they'll figure something out. But like my favorite player, Steve Watson, should be in the Ring of Fame. But a lot of people don't even realize who he is at this point because he's played for so long. Reuben Carter, Riley Odoms, like these are guys that should be up there that have been overlooked. I'm sure I'm even overlooking, some of the other ones. Is Ed McCaffrey up there yet?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think so.
Well,
and
there's
how?
And there's always like you got the ring around the one section. You can always bump it up a section, run it down a section. So there's plenty of room.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure your thoughts were done before I start talking again.
Go ahead. We're good.
All right. And with that, that's going to do it for the show today. Appreciate everybody that joined us on the podcast. Make sure you stick around for Sports Nonsense and Whiskey. That is coming next. And check out every other show that's on the MHRT network. Mondays, you got the Cluster Puck. Tuesdays, you got the 5280 and Sports Nonsense. On Wednesdays, you've got the Wild Wild West and mainly Broncos right after that. And then on Thursday, you got the BPA Show. And then on Friday, you've got Broncos Breakdown, Bronco Bill. And then on Saturday or Sunday, you've got the Neighborhood that does Avalanche games and going to start doing Broncos games when those kick in. So make sure you check all that out. Like, subscribe, share, comment. Just out on Facebook because I hate Facebook at this point. Stupid Facebook. Hate him with a passion right now. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining us. Go Broncos, go Avs, go, and we'll see you guys later. Peace out.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, go,